On my side, I would also like to thank you everyone for attending this meeting, especially because this one is, as Andrea has said, is thematically aligned with the work that we have been carrying out on policy issues. So I'll jump directly to the slides. So the SUMPs, they have been becoming increasingly important, as you probably know, and also increasingly adopted across all Europe, exactly to deliver integrative planning. So currently I can see reference online to more than 1,000 plans of this kind. Of course, the understanding of what a SUMP is varies a little bit across countries. We all know that some plans give higher emphasis to some steps of the life cycle of a plan than others. Some plans are even presented as a list of measures per se, developed by experts in their offices without giving proper attention to the concrete understanding of the mobility problems, without dialoguing with the stakeholders. But there are others who see these two with this transformative character that I've added there. So they see a transformative potential. And I believe that most recent SUMPs have indeed adopted this transformative character that helps cities to navigate these uncertain times. So SUMPs in general, they are becoming more structured, more intersectoral, more interdepartmental, and more participatory as well. Also, what is important to retain is that this concept is not new. It has been around for quite a while, and it will become even more visible now with the revision of the TNT regulation. This revision will make the SUMPs mandatory for the first time across Europe, so binding for all the 430 urban nodes of the TNT network. Of course, in some countries, like in Spain or in other countries, SUMPs are already mandatory, while for others, like in Portugal, they are not. But now with the TNT, there will be this coordinated approach. And also, what I feel is that as a result of this policy, SUMPs are becoming more outward oriented. I mean, with the TNT provisions, it is clear that the urban nodes, they need to take into consideration the long distance connections. They need to manage the flow of passengers and cargo as well in large transport hubs. But with the guidance and inspiration from the long-term vision of the Commission for the rural areas, I think the SUMPs, and especially I'm referring to those that are developed in small and medium-sized cities, they will also need to be attentive to the transport connections to the rural areas that the city serves. Because cities that are small or medium, they normally play a kind of clustering effect over the rural areas, so over a large rural interval. But I've added here this last statement also to remind us a bit that a lot of attention has already been put in the city centers, in the city core. They are already, some of them are already becoming CO2 frugal. I think that currently the main sustainability problems that cities face lie in the suburbs, in the peri-urban areas, in the sparsely populated areas where people have indeed less transport options, and most of the time they are captive of the car. So our areas of interest for SUMPs, well, I kind of already answered to the question before. Of course, if we compare with other continents, we can say that Europe is rather compact, polycentric, especially here in Central Europe. However, there are also several areas of the continent that are profoundly rural, like in Portugal and in many other places. And this corresponds to the majority of the land area of Europe. Also, most rural areas are considered remote, which means that they are more than 40 minutes drive from the nearest city. They are experiencing a fast decline in population, especially among the population that has a working age. And if we look to the results of a Eurobarometer survey that was developed as an input, as a basis for the long-term vision of the Commission for the rural areas, we can see in the results that the main concern faced by people living in rural areas was indeed transport infrastructure and connectivity, especially to the necessary urban services that cities provide to rural dwellers, so jobs, education, healthcare services. Of course, we can also forget that most citizens in Europe live in small and medium-sized cities. These play the clustering role that I've mentioned before over the rural hinterland. So indeed, if we want to leave no one behind, we need to adapt our transport planning frameworks in order to pay more attention to these rural areas. And with this, helping to fix population, leveraging on the tourism potential of these areas, and help ensuring indeed a fair digital and green transition. I will speed up a bit. These two plots, I have extracted these from One Horizon project that finished recently, and they conducted some large surveys. And the results show essentially two things. One, that the level of adoption of CMPs directly correspond to the size of the city. So it's much higher in larger cities. But this is what we could already expect from this, and is also consistent with our own research with the network members. But then the figure on the right-hand side shows that the level of private transport is higher in cities that are smaller. So when I look at these figures, my immediate reaction is that the model split is also shaped by the existence or non-existence of the CMP. So it's manageable. And then it comes without a surprise that the smallest cities have higher dependence on private vehicles. But it also shows, like I said before as well, that the main decarbonization efforts need to be focused on these smaller cities that play that clustering effect over rural areas. So things are interlinked. And so interest for SMARTA, we definitely need to put a kind of placeholder in CMP guidance documents to ensure that the rural communities and business and traffic from tourists that visit rural areas or that are based in rural areas and visit urban areas, that all this is not neglected, is not left behind in the urban mobility agenda. So the main objective is really to produce a guidance document that helps urban planners to integrate the rural dimension into existing CMP guidelines. Way to do this, learning how to mainstream rural mobility aspects along all the phases of CMP design, so as to enhance territorial cohesion, extending the typical catchment area of CMPs in order to leave no one behind, addressing concerns about the surrounding rural communities and the tourism flows between urban and rural sites. And at the same time, the guidance that we are going to produce can also provide kind of inspirational food for thought for national authorities who will develop national guidance for the development of CMPs in each member state. In terms of methodology and timeline of our research work, this has really been bottom up, especially relying on inputs from this audience, but also from the ERMN network members, and complemented with interviews with experts. So what is important to retain here is that we are now producing the guidelines, so we are in this phase. These guidelines are based on interviews, an open consultation, focus group activities, and I hope this meeting today, of course, can also provide some additional inputs for this document. And once we consolidate, once we digest all this information, the idea is that we will certainly use this as a starting point for the training sessions on this topic that will also be organized in the next month. I also brought here some of the results of the open consultation that we have made on this topic and that have been analyzed in the form of...
Andre, sorry for interrupting, 2 minutes left.
I need to speed up, yeah.
Okay.
So we analyze some information, we call it knowledge maps, you can see the preliminary results in our website, and now the consultation has closed. And I wanted to just to show you a snapshot of the main results. But I think probably you can see this later on when the slides will be shared. Just wanted to highlight that a significant share of tourists visiting urban areas also travel to the rural interland, and that of course, when we ask what are the main functionalities that attract rural commuters, well, obviously the result is that they are jobs, education, service. But if we tweak the question and ask what are the urban functionalities that people from rural areas find more difficult to access without relying on a private vehicle, then results change significantly. And we can see that the main obstacle lies in things like access to leisure and culture or sport facilities. So I guess this reminds us a bit that the mobility needs should not be restricted to basic services, and that we need to take into consideration other aspects as well. And these are the two final slides where we try to outline some of the recommendations and suggestions for rural proving CMPs along the CMP life cycle. One idea was to setting up these WISE group committees, meaning consultative bodies that include local citizens with contextual information about who lives and how it is to live in a rural area, and that might be consulted across a CMP life cycle. We have seen this in Flanders. Also, when we are developing methodology for determining the catchment area of the CMP, it has a consolidated methodology nowadays. It's the functional urban areas, the acronym FUAS. But we need to understand that the methodology is based on commuting habits. So if we follow strictly such methodology, we would be ignoring all the tourism flows and also the occasional transport flows from rural areas to the critical service, as we've seen in the previous slide. Then in phase 2, we need to establish indicators and targets. We can find inspiration from this based on the work that one of the Irish network members have undertaken, building the Sustainable Mobility Index for rural time, or in an interesting activity that was developed in Louvain for involving crowdsourcing storytelling initiative. So these can be additional indicators that could complement the usual set of indicators that transport practitioners normally use. And then when transport practitioners actually need to guarantee that the package of measures, but even those that are not implemented in rural areas but are also implemented in city centers, do not have negative knock-on effects on rural dwellers. And this might involve thinking of measures for exempting rural citizens or mitigating their burden or compensating for their burden. And this is really the final one. When we are finally implementing the plan, we often need to launch procurement processes. Considering that rural areas, towns and small cities, they often have less critical mass, a joint procurement of mobility solutions has also been mentioned as a potential solution for these territories, and also allows to share the cost, share risk, but also potentially help to create interoperable solutions, which are particularly relevant in cross-border regions. And I think this last point is aligned with the long-term vision that tries to counteract the argument that rural areas are less innovative than urban areas. What happens in reality is that when they are able to cooperate and forge networks like the one that we are establishing here in SMARTA-NET, the conclusion is that rural areas are also equally innovative. And I think I would like to end with this positive tone, because this is really aligned with the spirit of our project. And don't want to forget that if anyone has a good practice to share on how CMPs can better address rural areas, you can certainly drop me a message. And now I will leave the floor to Melanie, our invitee, for the keynote speech.